Hello, and welcome to another episode of Chatter, a podcast from The Gist. On today's show, we're talking to Brendan and Nathan from Fly By Those Nets. Now, Fly By Those Nets is a Northern Irish political commentary and opinion site, and they've set it up in the last 18 months or so, and we had a fantastic chat about the state of Northern Irish politics and, what the future might hold for us in this country. If you like the show, you can subscribe to us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, iTunes, wherever you like. Maybe even leave us a rating and review so we can grow. So without further ado, let's get on with the show. So Nathan, Brendan, it is nice to have you here.
Pleasure.
Yep.
I say here. This lovely Queen's graduate building that they've built since we all left.
Yeah, I mean...
Are you bitter about that?
A little bit. It's not bad.
It's just funny being around here because I didn't go, so I'm kind of pretending this is the life I could have had.
This is the life you could have had.
It is really weird how Queen's is so central to a load of sort of NI graduates just everywhere in every single business, and I didn't go to Queen's, so I just don't relate to them at all. They're all talking about all the regular spots to go drinking and all the rest of it. It's like, okay, I have no idea where you're talking about.
Where did you go?
Wolverhampton.
Okay. How's that?
I was in Glasgow.
It was alright.
You left and came back.
Yeah, it's I'd left actually in 2010 was when I had finished sixth form, and it was very much that mindset of I need to get away from NI, I need to get away from all of this and move on to a far better country, and a better life and all this business. And when I had moved over there, the flag protest kicked off, so I was explaining NI politics to all my English flatmates and all that business. But like the reaction to the flag protests and how like the society in general sort of came back and went, this is ridiculous, you can't do this, and there was campaigns to take back the city, as it was called, and get businesses up and running and all despite the rioting. That was very inspirational, and it gave me that sort of naive belief that I could come back to Northern Ireland that's on its way to somewhere wonderful. And here we are.
7 years later.
I should have stayed in Wolverhampton.
Well, there is something about Northern Ireland. You can't help but love it.
That's it. I was incredibly homesick over there. Like, it is its own place.
Don't know what it is. It's rubbish.
Certain magic.
Why are we all here?
It's our rubbish.
I know.
But yeah, so from there, you went to Wolverhampton and Glasgow, and then at what point did you figure out that you wanted to sort of look at running, Fly By Those Nets or something along those sort of lines or that vein?
Yeah, I mean, I still haven't come back. I haven't returned the conquering hero like Brendan. I'm currently living in Paris. I've been there like 4 and a bit years. So Fly By Those Nets was originally kind of a way of me just keeping up to date with stuff at home, giving me something to focus on, to sort of, just to stay in the loop in the news and kind of keep in contact with my mates from home. And that was all it was to start with. The whole idea of like flying by those nets was like, I managed to fly away to France and escape. So there's a bit of that going on, and then it just sort of evolved from there to be people at home as well. So got in touch with you through Twitter, I think, and then there's a couple of notes from that, and then so I'm still away, which is both good and bad, I think, for the perspective we get on things. But
well, yeah, you get that sort of seeing outsiders look at everything, and then the rest of us are just sort of frothing at the mouth.
So I can't sit here and rant about sort of offshore media moguls running the papers from other countries. Would you not take time into that?
Is that what you aspire to, actually? I don't think you...
That'd be ideal if I could sit in my little apartment in Paris and just kind of got my minions back home doing all the work. But it's been really good. I mean, that was the kind of whole idea, was to have... there's stuff going on at home in Belfast around Northern Ireland about from just a very local take on things, and then I do think there is a different perspective, not necessarily a better one or a more valid one or a more interesting one necessarily, but you've got a different view of things if you're lived away, even if it's for like your Erasmus year or you do your year abroad somewhere, or you just even having to explain home to new people who've never heard about it gives you a whole different view on it when it's not normal and it's not just like the default that this is how we live. You have to actually explain it. So it's kind of like that. It was like, I think I've got a different perspective compared to people who have always been here. Not necessarily a better one. I wouldn't want to be condescending either, but it's And originally, Fly By Those Nets was just me and a few friends who were living in Scotland, in England, in France, and then seeing what they thought, looking back in on it, and then kind of expanded it to people actually still living in Northern Ireland. So yeah, I mean, how do you see us, our boys abroad? Like, is it snooty?
You're not going to be able to get that image out of your head as the overseas.
Yeah, not terrifying.
Yeah.
I think when you brought me in, it was sort of actually the Tumblr thing comes into context here, where you'd known me on Tumblr previously, because I'd used that sort of. I felt like I was shouting into the void by myself, because it's got a very small NI community on there. And you can do long form blog posts on NI politics, which is what I was doing, NI politics, NI history, stuff like that, which was mainly educational to like Americans and outsiders. Again, it was just all sort of explain this madness to people who have no idea what you're talking about. And when you'd said about getting in for writing for Fly By Those Nets and everything, it sort of fits that gap that was left when I sort of left Tumblr for Twitter. Which was, I think that was a better choice.
You think it was a better choice?
Yeah, definitely.
Why is that? Twitter's not exactly the bastion of truth right now.
It's not, well, that's a good point, but around networking, contacts, NI politics, it's the ideal sort of place just to get in there to talk to people. And for Fly By Those Nets, actually, like sharing stuff comes in handy for the contacts on Twitter, because you're following and being followed back by like MLAs and other politicians and journalists and all that, and you can talk to them to get their insight into stuff. For Tumblr, because of the way that was very just shut off from everything, there was no real NI political community there whatsoever. You were given your opinion and just nothing was coming back, just deafness or the occasional American going like, wow, you guys are crazy.
Well, surely they should be more
feedback.
Americans should be more open to the evangelical idea, just because of the was it like 30% of the country is evangelical Christian in America?
Yeah, well, something along those lines, or wasn't it like upwards of 46% are all creationists? Was that, or young Earth creationists or something?
Of all of the population,
the American population.
No,
we'll need to fact check it. Actually, we'll get fact check NI on it.
Hang on, I will. I'm gonna look that up. But so then I think they would probably be more open to the idea, but so it was more you were finding yourself trying to explain our very unique situation to people, and that's where you sort of tried to carve out your niche.
Well, that's it. Actually, ties into the whole thing with Wolverhampton and explaining the flag protests to my flatmates. It was a flatmate that made me sign up for Tumblr in the first place. She had one for illustration purposes and all that, but it was just because I had spent so much time running through this stuff. Like, they're rioting in Belfast because they changed the flag flying policy of the city hall, and you just see this English person looking at you with just complete amusement across the table. I was like, okay, I could probably put more nuance into this somewhere.
Yeah, I think when you're trying to explain Northern Ireland in very plain terms, it does sound completely crazy.
Yeah, you try to be matter of fact, and it just doesn't work at all.
But I think that's kind of the problem as well, that we just assume it's crazy, and we assume it's nowhere else on Earth, and like everywhere is crazy when you zoom in on it.
They've got
it's just like
things.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the problem, is that we assume it's worse than anything, and like it's entirely like unexplainable. And yeah, I mean, people are still surprised when you say there's still peace walls, and they're like, what? I thought we got rid of the Berlin Wall like maybe 30 years ago. But it's like, I don't know, I think that's maybe part of the problem, is that we assume it's worse or more intractable than it actually is, because it's our wee country and we're different and we're special. Mm-hmm. And especially when you're abroad, you kind of play that up a wee bit, and you kind of love being the kind of outsider, underdog-y kind of, I'm not even from actual Ireland, I'm from Northern Ireland.
That's a controversial statement.
Yeah, like it's kind of written about this as well, like your whole identity changes when you leave. I've just found myself just saying I'm Irish because it's much easier for foreign people to kind of think,
you get bought way more drinks.
No, totally. But it's that kind of like, just like we're different, we're special, we're small, we're exciting because we're a wee bit odd, and there's a bit of a thrill knowing that there's a violent history compared to some more boring countries. Like, this is what it's not like what I actually think, but I mean, you kind of play up to that a wee bit to sort of play the more exotic card, as if there is an exoticism to Northern Ireland. But I mean,
it's tropical, we've got hurricanes now.
But so that was kind of it. It's just like trying to realize how to explain it, and then also has that sort of sense of perspective from being abroad, realizing that here other countries have this sort of shit, why can't we sort it out? and trying to really write about things from that sort of perspective of, here, I've been away and realised just how small and insignificant we are in the grand scheme of things. Why can't we just sort ourselves out? But then you immediately get into this sort of condescending sort of, I know better than you because I'm voting it over from mainland Europe and you guys don't know what you're talking about. So you have to try and avoid that sort of tone as well. But
a faceless bureaucrat in Paris.
So it's really useful, and then having that kind of contact with some mates back home and having them explain things from Belfast or from Derry, telling me what's going on. It was just a really useful kind of framework to keep involved with stuff, and means I can come home and kind of keep up without feeling completely lost. So
I did like the way for the 28 Days project, which was all around the lead up to the Assembly election, the angle was tell us something that you want to change about Northern Ireland or something interesting about Northern Ireland, all the rest of that. And it was that sort of aspect of giving them a platform, no matter what your sort of view was, no matter your background, no matter your writing skills, just as long as you've got an opinion on the country and what you want to happen or change about it, just fire it to us and we'll take a look at it, rather than that sort of sneering adversarial thing of I know better, here's exactly what's going to happen, all this sort of stuff. It was a more relaxed approach to it, which I think was good for the way it really captured me, where you were just saying about if I did like a particularly long Twitter rant or whatever, and you're just like, here, could you write this up into long form and we'll just chuck it on the side. I like that approach because it is that casual sort of thing of there's no pretentiousness there. It is just give us your genuine opinion, we'll put it on.
So that was great. So a bit more context that it was the Assembly election was the 2nd of March this year. So we just, at the end of January, it was like, here, we should do something coming up to the election, and there's 28 days, that's 4 weeks. We can probably find 28 writers, and we managed to fill that month with pretty interesting content from loads of different people. We kind of played it by ear. It was like we sort of led on that we had all the slots filled, so it was like a scarce kind of, you've only got a few more slots, so please get in touch. And people sort of got in contact, were like, here, look, I wouldn't mind writing something for you. So it's been really cool. I'm kind of looking forward to getting something similar like that going, but unfortunately, there's no assembly to kind of mobilise that around. But
we've only had one election this year. There might be another.
It's just wild. Too many elections the last few years. But I mean, that's Brendan saying there. Like, it's really cool because you get people who've never written something before, or a lot of the time people have imposter syndrome, which we ran into a lot, where like they think, oh, I'm not good enough to write. I'm not going to be. No one's going to listen to what I have to say, but I just wish I could write. And they just sort of sent a very vague first draft to us, and we just sort of between us you stick it on Google Drive together, and you have the comments, and you just sort of like crowdsource the editing process. It's been really good fun, actually. Just between our kind of core editorial team, just sort of help whoever the writer was to kind of come at their ideas a little bit better and try and help them write. That was really, really good fun, and kind of felt very worthy and exciting to kind of let people try something for the first time. We had people, the youngest was 17, 18.
Matt Grant, I think, was the youngest,
And then we had, people in their 60s, had people who were retired, had students, had people working.
An MLA candidate.
Yeah, had people who...
From what party?
SDLP, Niamh Gallagher. But we took the angle of trying to avoid any sort of party political stuff, so it was, just give your personal opinion.
We had pretty much most parties were represented in one way or another.
Because Matt was in People Before Profit at the time as an activist.
Yeah, so that was good as well. Like, we didn't want to take an actual... that's with the site in general. We don't want to take an actual stance on any of the parties, but the ideas themselves, you can very much be as driven by ideology as you want. But we had people from Northern Ireland who've lived there all their lives, people who have from Northern Ireland have left, people from elsewhere that have moved. As long as you had an opinion on it, you were good to go. It was. I'm looking forward to getting something similar. Just need to kind of find our next niche topic to mobilise people around, and there's...
we've got the conclusion from the talks is looming.
They've got a deadline coming up, don't they?
It's was it not originally November? It was supposed to be, but then they corrected it to the end of October, and then I don't know what the actual solid deadline is. Doesn't matter anyway.
Well, the talks from all I can hear are not moving forward in the way that was hoped.
I think there's just too much to unpack there, which comes with the country, I suppose. Because the key thing is The only thing I keep hearing noise over is the Irish Language Act, which is annoying because it is that sort of smokescreen system of, do you really think people believe that you are sitting at that negotiation table for months since the start of the year and it's all about one thing? In Northern Ireland, not a chance. There's multiple blockers.
Yeah, there's absolutely no way that's all it is. But it's a useful base riling topic.
Yeah. Perfect dynamic for the two main parties.
Yeah. But to go back to, you said a lot there. There was a lot to kind of go through. To your point about that sort of seeing that there's a lot of the problems that we might face in Northern Ireland elsewhere, and that maybe we think it's a lot more specialised because we like to think of ourselves as being that exceptional, sort of very unique place that we clearly are.
Of course, yeah. We're simply wonderful.
I think it was one of the first astronauts out into space said that he wishes that he could grab politicians and take them up to 22,000 miles or whatever it was, and just point at the planet and go, look, that's it. That's all we got. Like
the pale blue dot.
Yeah, like just to give a bit of perspective. Do you think that we do have a unique situation at all, or do you think that?
Of course, I think. Well, yeah, I mean it's unique, but so is everything. That's kind of the problem. It's like, yeah, of course it's unique. We've got our own actual stuff, and you're not going to dismiss the actual, real, hard stuff that we have to go through. But yeah, I just don't think that it's particularly impossible either. I think there's very real, practical stuff that could just be hashed out, and it's not. We're not that difficult a situation in terms of just get people working together and actually set up the institutions again and actually get the practical bare bones of the government going, and then have all that stuff later. I don't know, like it is just perspective that other countries have gone through similar things, and I mean it's always hard, but everywhere's unique, so that's not really the thing holding us back.
Okay, so talking about what's holding us back then, how do you see us moving forwards? Because this is something I've been mulling over quite a lot recently, and for a while, like ever since the assembly's kind of fallen apart, there is just that we're at a point now where there's like forced cuts being made to the health service, the education service. There's no government there to sort any of the budget shortfalls out, to deal with any signing of legislation, deal with any like serious local issues that can't be dealt with anything that isn't, just like local council work. But what's it, 7 months since the election?
Roughly, yeah.
No desire to form a government, really. Let's be honest here. Like they just don't have, for some reason or other, the fire under their feet to. And I feel it's because it was encouraging to see in the last assembly election that the DUP lost a percentage of their vote for the first time in years. Like that was for me the real like shining light of hope out of the election, and that people were maybe being turned off by the fact they weren't really helping the country at all, arguably.
It was 10 seats, wasn't it?
Yeah, but obviously the seat reduction affects that. But to me, they're not suffering electoral consequences of the scale that they should, given the problems that they're causing. Both the DUP and Sinn Féin, like neither party are innocent in the sort of breakdown of Stormont. Like, you could argue that the DUP are more culpable because of RHI and things like that, but neither party are completely innocent, as is often the case. So where do you see us going? Like, how do you foresee a future in which either they don't dominate Northern Irish politics or they start and work together?
Well, you led up to this topic. You have to answer first.
I don't know. There's kind of danger being like too naive and too hopeful, and just like actually, it's the only rational thing is just be super cynical about it, and it's just never going to work out because the issues are too deep set, and they're not going to agree on the core stuff. So I don't see that changing at any time. But instead, kind of what I was saying about there are just the practical stuff that can be sorted out. I nearly see like I don't know how you would even do it or how it would work, but like a kind of two-tiered thing where, you don't need to have forced coalition on certain issues, like, but then I don't even know how it would work. But like, basically you can sort out all the education, healthcare, all that kind of stuff without having to get everyone around the table to agree everything, and then kind of pass the other stuff on for further down the line where they can discuss the Irish Language Act or whatever, all the big kind of traditional cultural stuff that keeps people apart. That can just be dealt with at another time and get the bare bones of the government back up and running again. But the problem with that is everything is still divided along sectarian lines. Everything is still, the money does go to certain things over other things because of the way the parties are looking to keep their base mobilised and to get one over on the other side. And we're just so intractably stuck with that. But it's just kind of sad thinking that, I don't see any actual reason why they would ever want to work together anytime soon. So is power sharing the problem itself? Is that, I don't know. Yeah.
I do take the cynical view. I am massively pessimistic about NI nowadays. Obviously, my opinion has changed since moving back, but around the way of moving forward and everything else, I know there's a lot of more talk around voluntary coalition because they feel that that's the problem, that it's having to make Sinn Féin and DUP cooperate, which is causing the problem. And I think no matter how many times you bring in American diplomats or people who are political scientists to draw up different forms of democracy, if your country is fundamentally born out of that tribal split, that sectarian split, and that is so ingrained in its culture and its politics, because we have two elections. We have the nationalist election and the unionist election. Sinn Féin win the nationalist election and DUP win the unionist election, and everything else in politics is that, as you had said, that dynamic where it's some for us, none for them, and all that sort of business of where does the money go. And I think realistically we're not going to be able to continue forward with, no matter what institution, it can be direct rule if you want, we'll still always hit those stumbling blocks. There will always be that problem because the dynamic is constantly going to be about Sinn Féin want to united Ireland, and the DUP see that as their apocalypse, or unionism sees that as their apocalypse, so that will always shadow over every issue no matter what. So I think if we go to direct rule, the Shinners will just use that to their benefit. Like they know what they're at because they've got that one goal, so they can use that to themselves. And the DUP obviously see that as sort of a petty win, that sort of thing of, well, we took power sharing away from you, you're being ruled by London again, so they'll be happy enough with that. And that will just keep the tensions going. Like the sectarian divide will continue, nothing will be solved there. I think with power sharing, because a lot of this comes down to where everyone talks about mandatory coalition, how power sharing might be the problem. I think power sharing and proportionate representation is probably the best democratic system you could have in this country as a post-conflict society. But you need people to be willing to actually work together, which you're not going to get because those two sides are just so diametrically opposed to each other. They don't want to compromise on anything, even something as simple as the Irish Language Act. If it comes down to road signs, just let it happen and then go back to working in hospital or getting the hospitals up and running and all the rest of it. But they don't, because it is just, you cannot compromise whatsoever on that ideology, because that's the apocalypse. If you give them an inch, they'll take a mile, and our civilization will fall.
Yeah.
And I think power sharing would work. The idea is that you just need the compromise there. You need that willingness to make it happen, and you just don't have that here. And it's not just down to, obviously there's that separation with, we blame the politicians, as Sinn Féin and DUP are behind it, but it's NI that's behind it because they vote them in. The last election, as you said, the DUP didn't get they weren't held to account at the ballot box like people expected them would, for £500 million on wood pellets. But it doesn't matter what the scandals are, whether it's the SIF funding with UDA or any other allegations, the voters will still come out in force because they have to vote for that party because they will stop the apocalypse. And the Shinners will still get the votes out from the nationalist community because they have to push toward that one goal that will fix everything. And I think realistically, I don't see any sort of positive progress being made unless those two parties can just have a word with themselves and sort of figure out what the hell they want to happen here. I have very little respect for either of them talking about how they want to make Northern Ireland work, because they clearly just don't. And when people fret about politicians and our political parties being at blame. They are the ones voting for this, and they're happy with that, effectively. Like, we've gone through decades of this, and they're happy enough to just let that continue happening. So I'm very pessimistic about what the route forward is. I have no idea. I have no answer to it whatsoever beyond we need to sit down and look at ourselves.
Yeah, it's not exactly the most positive looking situation.
Yeah, it's not cheerful.
I'm not going to say
it's a sign of the times. Like, maybe they'll come out and there'll be a massive deal, and they'll be like, "Oh, Northern Ireland's amazing! Yeah, look at us, we're class."
We'll have a big
but
park.
for now, it's
we'll
all
have a big brew up at City Hall.
Okay,
Rabbit Stormont, maybe.
It's funny that, like, I'm talking about perspective and zooming out and seeing it from afar, but like the positive, hopeful version is we're still like within a generation of the Troubles, and like it's a post-conflict society. Like, the fact that it's running at all, the fact that, like, that's still.
Well, we've got the civil service to thank for that.
I mean, it's still. We're saying, like, yeah, there's no will to compromise. There was, and it got us to where we are now, where, like, we're broadly peaceful. So fine. There's I don't know. I don't see it happening anytime soon. That it's going to get up and running in a way that actually makes sense. But it's still. I don't think it can be entirely. Still the fact that it actually works at all in any way.
No, we can reassure ourselves, certainly, because like we're a young country within what years is 2017, so
but at what point is that
we're having our centenary? Yeah,
like,
but I mean, like, just as a
like,
sort of thing of, you just recognise that as the reality. We are a young country that was born out of a war. Like, NI was created as the result of a war. There was a sectarian boundary aspect to all of it, then it led to sectarian conflict, and then we finally had the massive moment of the Good Friday Agreement. And I think actually it was one of the challenges NI events recently, Duncan Morrow had said about that was the turning point, which ties into this whole thing of that was the bit where we were in the most brutal form of sectarian conflict, of just neighbours killing neighbours. There was no armies involved, it was just civil violence between paramilitary groups. And that was a country coming together and going, no more of this, let's try and make this work. But since then, we've faltered and stumbled and all the rest of it, but that is to be expected. Yeah. It is a miracle, at least, that we've managed to not revert to all-out violence again.
Oh, totally. Yeah, that's it. But it is, at what point does... Not the people... They definitely do use that as the excuse. It's like,
that's what we're not killing each other.
I mean, at what point do we just have to wait for everybody to kind of die off who was involved? Like, Gerry Adams will step down soon, Martin McGuinness is dead, Ian Paisley's dead. Like, at what point is it the next generation, or are they actually even going to be even worse than before because they've
got the distance from the violence?
What I would say is you can't blame that. You can in a way blame that previous generation, but they're also the ones that gave us
This is what I mean. Yeah,
the government that we have now, that they were actually more willing to work together.
This is what I'm worried about. Is like the next generation.
The next generation that have been forged by that fire of conflict without any sort of. You could almost argue that Martin McGuinness and Ian Paisley were keen to get government together for their legacy.
Yeah. As we were saying, there's no will to compromise, but this it's a very real example, is that they sat down together and they made it work for however long it lasted before it all fell apart again, but it can and did happen. But yeah, the danger is either the good version would be everybody's grown up after the Troubles, is more willing to compromise because they just can't be bothered anymore with all this nonsense, or it's going to be it's even worse than before because you lack that distance from it. You don't know how bad it actually was, and then
just double down and build up the bravado.
Yeah. So maybe we need these big figures again to kind of. There's lack of leadership. There's no big people to sit and tell everyone else what to do. Like, look, we're going to compromise. We're going to get this done.
That's a phrase I've heard a lot.
Yeah,
that there's a lack of leadership, and I'm not sure why it is that we're at this point. But it's really strange to see that lack of leadership reflected, like, around not just Northern Ireland, but like the UK.
Yeah.
Like, look at the Conservative Party that are in government. Yeah. Trump's not exactly showing, desirable leadership qualities,
to say the least.
And it's and look at the Brexit referendum. Everyone who was pushing for it suddenly washed their hands and ran away. Yeah, they lit the fire and ran for the hills.
So the zeitgeist is everything's a wee bit grim.
Yeah, a little bit, but there's also positives to take. But I actually wanted to go back to something you said there about the United Ireland being the apocalypse.
Yeah.
or even they think that the border poll is the apocalypse. Because I'm confused, honestly. Maybe they don't want to take the risk, but to me, there's no way if there was a border poll tomorrow, there's no way we vote to be united in Ireland.
Yeah, it wouldn't
be. But it'd probably be maybe 55 to 60 in favour of staying part of the UK, right?
Yeah.
The chances that we just economically, like, it would be suicidal for us because we get so much money from Westminster. With another billion on it.
But you're kind of assuming people vote differently.
Yeah.
People don't necessarily vote in their best interests.
What do you
as
mean?
we've seen.
In a referendum? No.
Yeah, well, like, and an issue that is a non-starter for so long can suddenly just be like, there you go.
Whereas this hasn't been like a non-starter. This has just been culturally ingrained as the deadline that's approaching.
Yeah, but I mean, like, yeah, it depends how it's handled. I mean, if it's just, okay, off you go, have your border poll, it's not going to go anywhere, just leave it at that. But yeah,
that would honestly, right, you see, if I was being really cynical and I was a DUP member and I was going, right, we need to hang on to Northern Ireland as part of the United Kingdom for the longest period possible. Population is going to catch up with us almost inevitably, and we need to figure out some way to maintain our power for at least our lifetime. I would say that the smartest way to do that would be to call the border poll as soon as possible, and then you have minimum 15 years where you can go, well, we had the poll.
Dead for a generation.
Yeah.
Although I think the current legislation around it is a system where once the Secretary of State decides whatever arbitrary system of it's now time for a border poll, it rolls every 7 years. So after the first one, if it fails, every 7 years.
I did not know that.
I'm not sure whether that still holds, whether an agreement has overruled that, but I thought that was the original setup for that.
But everything's up for
that makes
for
a lot
play
more
now
sense.
with the Good Friday Agreement and Brexit and all this, it's keeping all negotiated, so it's a bit dangerous anyway.
But I think like the DUP have a large responsibility for how to handle all of this, because if their fear is around that and it's all centred around Sinn Féin and all their demands that will eventually lead to United Ireland, whether it's two men signing a marriage contract or Ballymena having its name in Gaelic underneath, there's all this stuff.
We may as well be all speaking Gaelic and campaigning for the 8th to be repealed.
Oh yeah, thanks very much. But I think for the DUP's responsibility for this, as you were saying, if they were smart, just call it now and try to stem it off. But they're not very good at playing the smart game. When it comes down to
they do play a smart game in some ways.
Getting money mainly.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
You could tell that the Conservatives have never dealt with someone like the DUP. It's like, you have no idea what you're negotiating with here. Like, these people can, when they were trying to get the confidence to supply agreement, push through. I was just watching it laughing, being like, you have no idea how long these people can drag talks out for. It's like, you think, you want an emergency deal done on a Sunday? Good luck with that.
I'm just imagining the picture in Downing Street even, where they're just having a meeting to discuss how this agreement's going to go through, and the DUP arriving in with nothing, and all of the Downing Street people there with binders full of information for these talks and negotiations, and the DUP just walking in just like, "Sup lads?"
You mean kind of how David Davis walked into the Brexit negotiations?
Yeah, precisely. Wing it.
No, I'd go back to that. I do think, that probably would be the smart thing, but can we count on them to be smart? But there is danger. That's exactly the logic behind the EU referendum. David Cameron wanted to just bury it for a generation, get it out of there.
What if it backfires?
It kind of worked in Scotland.
I saw a crazy theory that he didn't. That he was quite happy to leave the EU because the whole way through the Conservative government in 2010 and then through 2015, they were constantly pushing back on EU tax evasion regulation. And in every single vote in the European Parliament, the DUP, UKIP and the Conservatives were endlessly voting against all tax evasion regulation that would have affected Britain. And that I saw a quite well thought out theory about how they were always pretty happy to be getting out of Europe, because then they could or the referendum runs really close and they can go, well, you know, if you want us to stay, you should probably be a bit more lenient on our tax evasion. And
yeah, who knows? It's done now, like, so we'll see. But well, yeah, that's kind of the danger with any sort of these referendums. I just don't like the idea of anything being put to referendum, to be honest.
Just it's anything massive in the hands of someone else.
It's kind of yeah, that's a whole other thing. But yeah, I mean, you do have to have the consent of the people to be part of Northern Ireland or not, and I think that's the one thing that you probably can't ask. But everything else, it's just people don't. I don't know. Anyway.
Well, I'm attempting to write a book at the minute about how technology is like affecting democracy, essentially.
Yeah.
How it has with like the way it's changed campaigning and like information, and how it can in the way in like putting together like direct digital democracy, or something the Labour Party are doing. They're trying to use like big data analytics to take like polls and surveys from their like entire membership, and then like use machine learning and like big data stuff to. I'm talking to Richard Barbrook next week about it. He's working on it to basically like use that to formulate policy, which can then be voted on by like the either government or by the Labour committee or whatever. And I'm just trying to get my head around how you get past the issue of people being informed on issues, because
that's kind of the whole reason we have a representative democracy, is so that we don't have to be informed.
Because there's the sort of communication factor that we didn't used to have, that you needed someone representing your interests somewhere if it wasn't within 5 minutes of your house, really. But that's gone. But the kind of learning and being informed part hasn't disappeared. Like that's still like a major part of being an MP. Not that seems to incentivize any of them to do it, but that's a major part of being an MP.
I mean, there's loads of exciting stuff. I don't know. I don't think anyone's cracked it quite yet.
No. Well, Momentum had an interesting app there that they just put out. We wrote, shameless plug, we wrote a piece about it. About how Momentum's app is the first time that technology has been used as a part of voting, because there was lots of votes at the Labour conference about different like policies that they can. I think the term is reference back to the Labour committee to be looked at again from the manifesto, or there's like rule changes within like how the party conference works, or how the party like democracy works, like how many MPs are needed for a nomination for a party leader in a leadership election, that sort of thing. And so Momentum put out this app, and it was basically telling all their members about the votes that were going on, which way Momentum were recommending to vote, but also having like a whole range of views on the issues. So it wasn't just like them using it to make sure to like militantly be like, you vote this way, and like organise like that. It was them going, we think you should vote this way, but this is why we think that, and here's the reasons why you might not want to. And it was completely like, whilst it was used by mostly Momentum members, it was there for anyone to download. And I thought it was a really crucial development for them to make, was to not just have, here's the vote, this is what you should vote. It was, here's the vote, this is what it's about, here's why you might vote X way or the other. And it's really, I don't know, I'm excited to see where it goes, but it's I think it's necessary to make sure that we have well-informed people. I mean, I'd be into that. I'd like that. I think that is a good thing. But I would be cynical in that most people probably couldn't be bothered. It kind of does have that effort of keeping up to date with every single vote, and like this kind of idea of direct democracy. Well, the Labour idea is more to take it and use like polling that you can get online now to then try and like formulate party policy that can then be sort of like, it's like almost like a preamble to Parliament, so that people are having more of a say in what's getting proposed to Parliament, and then Parliament, go through their usual committee stages and readings, debates, and that sort of thing. So it's just to give people more of a say on what's been sort of put out there.
I mean, there's plenty of stuff. Like we were fiddling around with an idea last year. It was kind of, again, it was while we thought that Stormont might be a thing again sometime soon. It's called Open Stormont, and it was kind of based on stuff that I'd done in Paris with this group called Democracy 2.1, which is a very internet savvy name. So it's kind of the whole idea of them is that they do direct polling upon like specific issues, and then you get to see just kind of the underlying, just what people think either way. But we were kind of thinking that there was ideas we could do that for Stormont, where you put out, say, a list of 30 things that you want Stormont to focus on, and the way they work is that you get positive votes and negative votes. So we ran a poll. We got over 600 respondents in January, just before Stormont was going back, and it was kind of, if this is the new Stormont, this is what people think they should be focusing on. And it was really cool because you got the positives and you got the negatives. So the vast majority of people said, you also get multiple votes as well, so you get 6 votes depending on how big the poll is. But so people were voting for healthcare, and pretty much most people selected that. And then education and stuff like those things are the priorities. And then you can see where the controversies lie, because there's things like the Irish Language Act. It was really interesting because it was pretty much split half and half, where half of people thought that is something that we should be focusing on, and half of people said that it isn't.
Could you correlate the data who was saying that between what they were voting for and other issues?
Yeah, you can go in and you can look at it specifically, but yeah, like very basic reading of it was, mostly nationalists want that to be the issue, mostly unionists don't, and then they're going to kind of say that. But it was interesting because we had one option, it all depended on the wording, and we want to get it together and do another proper one this time and get more people and have more representative. But it was like the legacy of the Troubles was the way we'd called it. Is that something that we need to be dealing with? And just nobody had selected it, and there was kind of this idea that
that's quite poignant. Yeah,
we were like, oh, okay, interesting that people don't think that's a priority, whereas actually what is going on is that those are the things that are holding all the talks up, are not necessarily legacy of the Troubles, but things linked to that, the tradition, the culture, the language, all those sorts of things are actually what get in the way of what people actually want to prioritize. So we find this polling system, so it was developed by these Czech guys in Democracy 2.1, and then they've used it in New York and in Tunisia and China and all around the world, and it's already working. And we were looking kind of integrate that into Fly By Those Nets a little bit and have like polls at the end of every article and see how the readers are responding to it and things. And that's kind of one of our projects that we want to kind of get going again. But unfortunately, until we actually have the momentum of a Stormont government up and running again, it sort of just goes nowhere. So we're kind of waiting to see what happens there first. But yeah, no, it's fascinating to see just people's priorities and actually ask them, and like if you had to choose, you've only got a certain amount of things you want to focus on, what are the things you want to focus on? So I think these tools are useful as a kind of background, kind of seeing the flavor of something, but if you're actually like polling people directly on specific votes and stuff, I think it's maybe a bit of limited use because people are just busy and they have their own lives and they want to get on with leaving the job to the people they elected to do the jobs.
I guess it's quite a bad indictment of the quality of our representatives when people want to do it themselves.
Yeah, I mean,
quite true.
I mean, that's kind of it. That kind of leads on to one of my other kind of pet peeves, I guess, is the sort of the breakdown in trust and just people don't appreciate the institutions now. And like if Northern Ireland is going to work, it has to have these strong institutions that actually are doing their jobs and working. So like we need Stormont to actually function, and we need our MLAs to actually do their jobs so that people respect them again. But I
don't know anyone who would honestly respect an MLA right now.
Yeah, but that's kind of the danger.
Like if they walked into, I think the best way to categorize it is if you were in somewhere where, some MP or somewhere in America, congressman, senator, something just won like a landslide victory, like they got the most votes, like the DUP just have, and they went into any bar, probably in a major city, people would be like, ew, buying drinks with them. Obviously it'd be the haters, but I'd say they get pretty good reception. If any MLA walked into a bar here,
but that's
just be snarky comments, although that might be a cultural thing.
But that's what I'm kind of getting at, is that our standards are set so low for people. We're like,
how do we raise that bar?
It's all the same. I don't know. I just hold them to account in a way that actually, I don't know. It's just kind of this. You see this meme of like oh, they're not doing their job, they're getting paid to do nothing.
It's kind of true.
It is kind of true, and there has been so much waste because they're not sitting at Stormont, they're not voting. But say a generous reading of it would be they're still doing constituency work.
Oh yeah, no, I'm not denying.
They're still
that
working.
Yeah,
there's all this, but the more we kind
they
of
don't
say,
have any power to do anything.
yeah, but they don't. And
They can go in, they can talk to people,
Yeah.
but that's about it.
Yeah,
like
and
realistically,
it's kind of just a shame to see it, and it's sort of self-perpetuating in that we don't expect much of them. So whenever they don't do anything, well, that's the way it always is, and we make jokes and we're very cynical and whatever. Whereas like a good example would have been East Belfast, the last Assembly election. They ran Geordie McCaig, who was part of LAD, and who was.
Yeah, it was
LAD and
Barrack
Barrack
Boys,
Boys.
them, I think. Yeah, Barrack Boys.
And that was all very hilarious, and they got this guy, the guy from the You Me a Tenner Dickhead, that video. It was also weird and classist and kind of, I don't know, I didn't like it anyway. But this whole idea of, sure, they'll just blew all this money on RHI, we're going to give this the salary if he gets into some, like, whatever. And it's just like eroding all our institutions and all our respect for it. If we don't believe in this to work, what's the point of any of it? And it's kind of that episode of Black Mirror where the kind of Trumpish blue dog Waldo. Geordie McCaig was Northern Ireland's Waldo for thankfully a week. And he came last and he got 80 votes or whatever, and it was all transferred anyway, so like whatever.
Thankfully,
but it was that. It just sort of hit me that like, yeah, like we don't give a shit about any of this really, because we just expect it to just go nowhere and them not to do their job, and we don't really follow up on whether they do their job or not, because actually they're all as bad as each other. It's all nonsense, and we're all very cynical by now because we've had to live through all this stuff. So what's the point of any of it?
That's not unique to Northern Ireland.
No,
yeah,
it's
like
not. But we also just don't have a government right now, so it's just feeding into that. And
yeah,
it just worries me that we don't really. And yeah, of course, the trend is wider across other places, but that would be maybe
we do have a reality star in the White House.
Yeah. But
that
going back to
high.
How would you see us being able to move forward? How would you be able to see us actually getting to work together again? It's maybe, hold our politicians to account and actually bang on at them if they don't do what they say they'll do. We do have very good access to the actual individuals here. We're massively overrepresented in Stormont, where before there was 108 before, now there's 90 for 1.5 million people. Like, that's wild compared to Westminster and the rest. Like, we can go into the pub and bump into some MLAs, we can follow them on Twitter, we can bang on at them to do this, that and the other. Like, we have an opportunity there because we have contact, and we are such a small place and everybody knows each other. And I think like actually making sure that our politicians do their jobs and to expect more from them, and don't just vote for the tribal stuff because at least he's in the right party. Doesn't matter how good he is or what he's actually going to do, they got in and kept them out. That's sort of part of the problem. So like, how do we build that sort of excitement over politics again, that you can make a difference and you can change and you can do stuff? I don't know, I'd be cynical myself, but what do you think?
With regards to the current impasse at Stormont, I think if there isn't a deal reached, and it's not looking particularly likely with the amount of baggage that's there, instead of direct rule, we could be looking at shadow Stormont, where the Assembly remains in place. We can elect our MLAs, and they will scrutinise the NI office.
Shadow Stormont does sound really
overlook
cool.
As an executive, it sounds it's suitable for NI actually. That sort of shadow Stormont as our government. But if that does come in, I think there is that potential there to try and get people more involved and going, we've got, how many elections have we had in the past 2 years now, and we're at the situation where you could just say, do you want to do something about this? Go out and choose the right MLAs, or harass your MLAs over these issues to try and get them fixed. Because if it comes to the point where the NI office is just covering most of the laws and the Assembly is there just as a puppet show to just vote on things and scrutinise them and not really change anything or govern, then at least we can use that as a sort of tap into the anger of the population as a demand higher from them, demand that they actually do something to fix this place.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what we ended up wanting to do with Fly by Those Nets, was kind of expand beyond just articles and actually have a platform for like just teaching people how to go about activism and campaigning, and like how to contact your MLA, how to contact your local councillor, how to do this. If you want to complain, this is who you go to. If you have a problem, this is who you should talk to. Get experts from different places in to write like kind of how-to guides. We've kind of been building that up a wee bit. It's more like, not only are you just reading stuff passively, it's like, how do you engage people to actually you've actually got quite a lot of power as a citizen, as like a consumer, kind of. You can just you can go and complain. People don't really do it. They're like, oh sure, they're all the same, whatever, there's no point. But you can go into their constituency office and have a chat. People don't do that. Like, if we're thinking about direct democracy and using technology and apps to kind of bring people closer to politics, you forget the human thing is already there. And because we are overrepresented and there is that kind of colloquial, kind of jovial, everybody knows all their local boys, and like, why don't use that for good, and why don't like bring the contact back again, teach people how to do that. So I don't know, those were my vague ideas about what to do about it, but
it still falls into the standard trappings of NI, where the tribal aspect will kick into that. Where you know, like, if you've got a problem, go and talk to your MLA. And it's like, well, my MLA doesn't really like me, and they're probably not going to respond to my emails.
But concerted effort, bombard them with.
That's it. Get a campaign going.
Yeah. So I don't know, but
it's all a bit, I don't know. Genuinely, at this point, it's very interesting. I suppose if this is where the outsider view would be brilliant on a lot of this, because I've got a few English mates who will occasionally message me from time to time, where they'll see, thanks to the DUP going into government with the Tories, I now get regular wee questions from them about stuff that's happening in NI.
To be fair, that was a little bit entertaining.
Oh yeah, that was 100%.
Just to be like, hang on, wait, they believe what? What? No, you can't be serious. They have how many cities? They're the largest party. Just to watch just people melting down on Facebook, just be like, the amount of different people being like, what? These people exist in our country?
So I went to the count centre for the general election to take photos, actually, fly by those nets coverage of it. And while I was in there, you're shut off from the rest of the world and all that. You're in there, you're absorbed in what's going on. And then I got home pretty early in the morning and then went to sleep and woke up at like 11 a.m. and my Facebook inbox is just full of 34 messages from English people just going, who are the DUP? It's like, right, we'll start in 1690.
Yeah. Oh, man. Did you ever get a good way of just summing up Northern Irish politics when people, like, if you got like a one-liner that you try and use to explain it?
Not at all. It's actually a friend of mine I know through Tumblr, actually. It's a Brazilian lawyer who was a law student at the time, got me to give a lecture to her university over Skype about NI history. And like, there was no way to summarize it. It was like, immediately I had to go back to the Williamite Wars to try and provide context. Because the problem is you can't sum it up. It's more difficult than you can ever make it out to be. Because like, you can just go, some people are British, some people are Irish, and there's a dispute over who gets to own the country. And like, you can try to sum it up as that, but that's not really accurate. I think I'm just being pedantic about it. I'd feel wrong misinforming anyone.
You just got to get right how long you got.
Who was it? There was the much repeated joke about that thing. I've forgotten the name of it, but they were talking about like, how do you summarize the DUP, and there's the great line about them being like the Old Testament or something. I can't remember what it was. I'll have to look it up.
Is that Owen Jones?
It might have been.
Yeah,
See if I can find it.
There was a bit of
the champagne socialist himself. Oh no, that's harsh. I do like Owen Jones. He does some great writing and some really funny interviews.
I think he's a good lad. His book on the elites,
the establishment, how they get away with it.
That was really good. But that was interesting because the best example of all the things he was talking about was Northern Ireland, like how the establishment gets away with like all colluding with each other and everybody like. And it would have just been an entirely different book if he had just gone, oh yeah, what's that about the police? what's that about Hillsborough? Like all the examples he has. You're like, yeah, that's all stuff that we have to deal with in Northern Ireland. But that was kind of it. Seeing people from across the water trying to summarise what our lived like experience of underneath the DUP has been, and just sort of going, here, where were you, sort of thing.
Yeah.
I kind of, it's weird, like at the time it was this like, I kind of categorised as this sort of like schadenfreude, where you're like looking at other people's misfortune and kind of feeling happy about it. Yeah. I sort of felt
welcome to our hell.
It was kind of like the idea, like, I don't know,
I've been trying to
it's like a self-reflexive, like self-schadenfreude, like I'm taking enjoyment from my own misery, like seeing other people go, "Oh my god, the DUP are terrible," and I'm like, "Yep," and then kind of feeling a bit like smug about it because like, "Yep, welcome to how we live our lives every day," and it was just kind of weird. Like it was hard to describe it to people, but it was like, yeah, people were like we were kind of like masochistic, like sort of. Yeah, just enjoying the attention for once. It was just kind of, I don't know.
It was nice. They all suddenly decided, remembered we were here.
Yeah, but I mean, why would they?
Not
why
just
would
a little
they care?
footnote on the election results in the corner.
Well, that was one of the big ones for Fly By Those Nets, actually, where it was just sort of fitting the language at the time, obviously just in defence of the platform. Obviously, we tried to take a relatively objective editorial approach, but the article was called Meet Your New DUP Overlords. And it was just a rundown of all of their scandals, everything they've been accused of, all within the laws of libel, I might add.
Oh, yeah,
but
as long as you
it
got
was
the source,
just
you're fine.
all of their
Yeah, it
all-star
was all
moments.
hyperlinked back, but that was it. We tried to do a wee bit of clickbait listicles type stuff.
Oh yeah, no, we got our who are the DUP line out article out there. You know, we had so much traffic just through Google searches for the DUP. We still get it. It's like people still looking up who they are
because they still have to deal with it. Like that deal is still lingering there, and like the abstaining on the vote recently with regards to the
DUP,
universal credit.
The DUP deal is going through. Like, this is how I explain it to people. When people are like, "Oh, you know, it might not happen," it's like, right. If you're a Conservative right now, what do you not want? It's an election or any whiff of an election. Like, not because... So the Fixed Term Parliament Act leaves that the current government could collapse. They would have 2 weeks to install a new one without having to call an election. So they don't want any whiff of that even happening realistically because, you know, Labour are still up there in the polls. I think there was a Survation poll the other day, had them up 6 points, and obviously that's an outlier, but that's still worrying if you're a Tory. They don't want anything that's going to put that in jeopardy, right? So they're all going to vote for it. They're all going to stand up like Anna Soubry did during the second reading debate of that Brexit bill and scream their heads off and then do nothing. Like their bark is worse than their bite. Yeah. Tories love to toe the party line. Like statistically, they do more often than Labour. I don't know what it is about the party, but they seem to stick together. And the DUP aren't going to vote against it because they're getting the £1 billion. I don't see any scope for it to not go through.
So, I feel like I think it's inevitable that they will stick to the deal regardless, because for all of their failings, I think that's one of their successes they can build on, where they can say we've this funding, and like after RHI and the rest of it, you need that £1 billion.
Yeah, you'd be like, look, we lost £1 billion. Well, or we lost $500 million. Well, we doubled it. Here we are.
Although again, it's NI, so it doesn't matter. Even if they didn't get the $1 billion, they can just go back to the next election and throw the dead cat with IRA on it onto the table.
Yeah, that's another good one. But I don't know. It's kind of sad as well. I think, it's expanding on a rant I might have went on last night in the pub. But, no, like, I don't know, to get on my high horse, because the high horse is the best horse.
Have we not been on our high horses all
yeah, this is the entire point of this.
Yeah. Well, I guess this is what I do, is so I can preach. Just get up and lecture people.
That's it. No, but, like, it's just the danger of like intellectualizing like actual people's lived experiences of like how shitty it is to live in this country sometimes in certain ways, and like, oh yeah, the DUP, it's hilarious that they're all creationists, it's hilarious that they're all terrible against women and gay people and all this kind of stuff, and it's like, oh yeah, it's kind of funny that English people are now realizing this, and it's like, yeah, but it is a danger of like getting away from like the actual policy implications for a lot of their views, and like it is just a bit scary how easy we find it to trivialise it as just, and kind of explain it away as, oh, isn't Northern Ireland a bit weird? Oh, it's kind of funny that we still live like this now. And it's like, I don't know, there's real people getting affected by that recent vote on like universal credit, whatever. Like, people are in danger all the time just because of the ineptitude of our basic public services being run by a government that doesn't exist, and like things aren't getting through, money's getting lost.
Well, they were having to make those.
It's just
that Unison were just fighting £70 million in cuts to the health service that were just like imposed halfway through the year because they didn't have a minister to deal with it.
So this is the kind of stuff that
that was frontline services they were having to cut. Like, it wasn't that they were cutting empty beds; it was beds that were full that they were going, we can't afford to. And that's horrifying.
But that's it. It's like, it's easy to forget that if you're not immediately affected by it, and that is what I struggle with. And that, I live away, and it doesn't really bother me in my daily life. I'm like, oh, there's cuts to this, there's that, or this minister said this stupid stuff again. Like, I can kind of fly over that and just not really see it happening. But when you actually stop and you think, well, what is the implications of us just not having a government in place? Like, it's the cynicism's fine to deal with it, but like, I don't know, what are we going to do? Like,
you get a lot of. There was a comment made before, actually. It's the dad of someone I know who was doing this line. Sort of, it was a couple of months ago, and he was saying about, how long have we been without a government now? Have I got any less money in my pay packet? Have I got any less food on my table? No, I'm just doing just fine. Is that like grand for you if you're looking at it from that perspective? But like, at least take a moment to consider everyone else that relies on ministerial decisions and a government being in place.
Yeah, but that's a similar thing. It's like, are we actually worse off after Brexit? It's like, some people very much will be, but you might not be. So
some people already are.
Yeah, some people are doing it.
Like food bank use has gone up, inflation's up.
It's terrifying.
There's definite like. I don't want to be that, because of or despite meme, but it's affecting people, and sometimes it is necessary to take a step back when you're writing about things. And there's actually Dennis Skinner gave a little bit, like a really short interview to Owen Bennett of the Huffington Post at the Labour conference. Have you seen it? And I'll put the link in the description for the video. But he's basically saying, look, you stop pretending like you're above all these things you're asking about. You're part of the system. Like, you're going to be affected by everything that's been discussed here, and it is necessary, I think, when you're writing about things as well. Like, you have to consider that. Okay, you can talk about the economy in pure numbers, like GDP per capita. You can talk about average wage. You can talk about the amount of money people are taking home. But like, sometimes you've got to like take a step back and realize that these are people. That are waiting 6 weeks for their universal credit payment, and it's 1 in 5 people waiting 6 weeks, or 1 in 10 people waiting more than 10 weeks. Like those are real people, and that's like 1 in 10 people. So you tell me, if there's 100 people who are on universal credit in a room, 10 of those people would have had to wait more than 2 months. Like, that's horrifying for someone who's living on the very like edge of poverty. It's and then it's easy not to get riled up and get emotional, and it's more difficult to have a discussion about things when it is an interest. Well,
that's what I want to. It's the only reasonable reaction is to get really, really angry, and I think that's what we don't allow ourselves. We don't leverage that in the way that would actually be helpful. Instead, you're told to no, come on now, we need to calmly discuss this and sort it out. It's like, no, like, people are angry, and how are we going to use that for our benefit to kind of actually maybe force something through that'll work?
It ties into, like, actually as a barometer, the whole situation with graduates just not coming back to NI.
And why would you?
The brain drain, as it was called a few years back. This whole angle of just like people looking back at NI and just going, there is nothing here for me, and nobody's doing anything, nothing's changing, the government's gone. What's the point in going back? And they'll just stay or emigrate. Because like, my older sister now lives in New York, my older brother now lives in England, my cousins, a couple of them have now moved out to New Zealand. My younger brother's studying in England. Don't know whether he'll be back to Northern Ireland. Like, it's a difficult position at the moment to try and argue in favour of them coming back. I think that's very much where momentum needs to be built, where like we need that common consensus across the country, where we look at things like food banks and like universal credit, like just the concept of, could you imagine your son waiting 6 weeks to get his universal credit? He's relying on a food bank to feed himself. Do you think that's an acceptable set of circumstances? Everyone would be like, no. And you just need everyone to agree on that and just decide that this is not good enough and actually do something to change that.
Yeah, I mean,
well, that's
not we can stay on that high horse. I mean, we can hopefully maybe try and be a bit of that and try and mobilise people and try and keep people aware of all what's going on. Like, that's kind of what we'd kind of hope to be part of. Give someone something to do. Don't just be passive and read this and go, oh, that's outrageous.
Rather than just like a wee
what are you
blog
gonna
post up the vent.
Yeah, which is all very well and good. I think it's important on its own to, it's cathartic to be angry and just to express it, but what are we going to do with all of this? And yeah, I mean, kind of loop right back around to where we started, but like, yeah, we originally sort of had that sort of outsider view of Northern Ireland from abroad, how are you going to do it? But kind of a long-term vision would be sort of to mobilise the diaspora of everybody from Northern Ireland who lives away, the brain drained people, because there's like thousands of people. Usually if you've gone away, there's a good reason for it. So there's people in big high powered jobs or working for massive organizations getting really great experience of other things that might work. They see businesses that are doing well, they work for governments that are actually there, they work for big organizations, and like, how do you leverage their experience and their continued like empathy for people living at home that they do still care about, they've got their family, their friends, their whoever, and try and have some sort of link between that. And that's what we'd want to sort of be the bridge between. Before the last election, I was thinking like, you're allowed to vote at home up to 15 years after you left in the UK, which is huge compared to down south where it's 1 year or 18 months, I think. And you forfeit the right to actually have a vote, which is ridiculous because you have people going away studying and then they don't have a say on what's going on with their parents back home. There's loads of push for people, specifically in like the London Irish community, to try and like extend their voting rights so they can have a say in the elections there. But we're lucky, we have 15 years and we have a massive brain drain, for lack of a better phrase. How do you mobilise those people to switch their vote from voting in, say, London and get them to vote in East Belfast? And if you manage to do a really great organised campaign and you basically have a 19th constituency of the people who have left, and who would win that? How would that affect our politics? There's this sort of vague idea that if you've left, you're more open and liberal and whatever to different stuff, and you've got out of the bubble, you've flown the nets, you don't have your nationality, language and religion holding you back anymore because you've seen what it's like on the other side. And that's like, it's a generous reading of it. Not everyone's going to be in any way different, but that's the kind of thing we sort of naively hope to leverage, is that people care, people do keep up with stuff at home, and if you got them to vote on stuff and you mobilise them all in one go, what could maybe be different?
Because we do have, like, to bring it back to the institutions as well, they're set up in the ideal way for that, as I was saying, like the ideal democracy, because it is proportionate representation. If you get enough people voting in that style, it could affect something.
First of all, people aren't voting anyway.
And turnout is shocking.
Well, the last turnout was the largest since the Good Friday Agreement, and that just brought back the same thing.
I still think it's horrifying, the low level of turnout. Like the fact that they accept like 67%,
was it?
It's like that means like 1 in 3 people who could aren't voting.
So
like
there's that.
Statistically, one of us didn't vote.
So, but that's it.
Who was it?
I did.
You did the proxy through your dad?
Yeah, I did my proxy.
No, I won't say who, but wrote a whole big thing about why you should vote, and he didn't even organise his postal vote. It's like, what the heck?
Well, on that note,
so
we'll wrap up.
Yeah.
Thanks very much for taking the time.
It's good.
Thank you.
And good luck with everything with Fly By Those Nets. Hopefully you find some new inspiration and we get a government. I hope to be listening back to this in 6 months being like, oh, well, at least it was all right.
Oh, worked out.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, you can subscribe to us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, iTunes. Tell your friends about us and generally spread the word. Later in the week, we have interviews with Richard Barbrook and Francesca Lake of the Future Science Group. So until then, thanks very much for listening.